So good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here tonight and to welcome you to our special members event this evening. My name is Donna Gustafson. I'm the Chief Curator at the Zimmerli Art Museum, and it is really my distinct pleasure to start us off on tonight's program. We're having two virtual tours of two of the newest exhibitions that are now on view at the Zimmerli Art Museum: Beauty Among the Ordinary Things, the photographs of William Armbruster, and Snapshots, selections from the Peter J. Cohen Gift. I'm really happy to introduce the curators of these two intriguing shows. Both of them were students at Rutgers University, and both worked in the museum with me for several years before moving on to continue their education and careers. You're in for a treat because Austin and Hannah are exceptional young thinkers and scholars who contributed greatly to the development of our ever-growing photography collection. These two exhibitions focus on recent gifts to the collection, and because they explore photography done by amateurs and often anonymous photographers, they expand our understanding of the many roles that photography and photographs play in everyday life and also in the art museum. So I'll begin by introducing Austin Losada, who will be our first speaker. And then I will give you an introduction of Hannah Shaw, who will be our second speaker. So Austin Losada is a second-year Lois F. McNeil Fellow in the Winter Tour program in American Material Culture, which is held jointly between the Winter Tour Museum and the University of Delaware. His master's thesis examines the design and manufacture of the book-like cases used to display and preserve early photographs, including daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, and tintypes. As the Mellon postgraduate intern at the Zimmerli Art Museum, he assisted with exhibition planning, academic programming, and collections management. And he's also the curator of Beauty Among the Ordinary Things, the photographs of William Armbruster. Our second speaker will be Hannah Shaw. Hannah is a PhD candidate specializing in the history of photography. Her dissertation, August Sonder and the Photographic Conditions of Nazi-Era Germany, considers how Weimar-era photographers and photographic strategies were integrated into the visual culture of National Socialism. Her doctoral research has been supported by the German Academic Exchange Service and the Getty Foundation, and her scholarship has appeared in the journals Photo Researcher and Zeitschrift für Kunstgeschichte. As a graduate curatorial assistant at the Zimmerli, she curated and co-curated a number of exhibitions, including It's Just a Job, Bill Owens and Studs Terkel on Working in 1970s America, and Tiananmen Square, 1989, photographs by Kian He. And Hannah is the curator of Snapshots, selections from the Peter J. Cohen Gift. So we're asking that you save all your questions for the end. Janine will return to field questions. So please type any questions that you do have in the Q&A feature and we'll take them one by one. So let me now hand the microphone over to Austin Losada.
Thank you, Donna. So first, I just wanted to say thank you all for being here this evening. And before I begin, I wanted to thank Janine for setting up this virtual event and having me take part. Also, I wanted to express my gratitude to Donna Gustafson, whose unwavering support gave me the confidence and opportunity to produce this show as an intern, nonetheless. And lastly, I'd like to express my happiness that I get to share the Zoom screen with my old colleague, Hannah Shaw, who, like Donna, guided me and shaped my thinking during my time at the Zimmerli and still does. So let me share my screen. So I'm going to be talking about the exhibition Beauty Among the Ordinary Things, the photographs of William Armbruster, that slowly came together over my 2.5 years at the Zimmerli. But before I get to the content of that show, I want to begin with how this exhibition came to be, and to do so, I need to take you back in time. In January of 2019, I was hired for my position at the Zimmerli to assist with academic programming and exhibition planning. And during my interview, it was only subtly hinted at that a major part of my work would also be about processing an incredible gift from the former Jersey City Museum. With an interest in collection management work, I was totally up for the challenge, and without knowing much about the former Jersey City Museum, I was eager to sink my teeth into the incredible artworks that they collected over their history. But it quickly became apparent that the collection was quite unwieldy and totally out of my area of expertise. The Jersey City Museum collection had a phenomenal holding of modern and contemporary artworks, the highlights of which are currently at view at the Zimmerli. But it also contained material culture spanning from 19th century furniture to 20th century dental products. The incredible diversity of art and material culture that made up the Jersey City Museum collection was not unique, however. Like most local museums founded in the early 20th century, the Jersey City Museum started its institutional life adjoined to the local library, simply operating out of its fourth floor. Opening its doors in 1901, the Jersey City Museum was a product of shifting ideas about the roles of libraries and urban centers had during the 20th century. Thanks to prominent and recognizable figures to New Brunswick audiences like John Cotton Dana in Newark, New Jersey, progressive ideals shaped the library into a cultural center that sought to preserve and make local history more accessible to the public. As an outgrowth of these democratically minded libraries, local museums collected material culture that expressed the individual character of that city, tracing industrial development and products, the cultural and social history of diverse immigrant groups over time, and of course, the artistic expression of its talented denizens. Operating until 2010, the Jersey City Museum's collection reflects this history, and the objects that it commissioned, collected, and took allows material culture scholars, art historians, and public historians an opportunity to tell hyperlocal stories with objects. Beauty Among the Ordinary Things, the photographs of William Armbruster, is an attempt at tackling this possibility. The exhibition brings together a selection of carbon and platinum print photographs, as well as reproductions of glass slide negatives and a small amount of printed ephemera to tell a story about how the medium of photography became a tool of expression for one Jersey City resident, and how this pursuit for artistry fits into a larger story about how residents across the state, city, and nation engaged with photography as an organized social activity and a response to the disruptions of modern life at the turn of the 20th century. So the exhibition's title comes from an article that William Armbruster wrote for the Boston-based amateur photography publication Photo Era in 1915. Its full title is Beauty Among the Ordinary Things in Nature, and its contents express Armbruster's steadfast belief that the beautiful was not only found in the great wonders of the world, but could be found in one's local environment. This commonplace belief seems simple today, but for amateur photographers in the quarter century prior to Armbruster's remarks, the rapid growth that cities in the United States underwent created a real crisis for cherishing the beautiful vistas and pastoral scenes that seemed to be quickly vanishing. Leading up to and throughout the first quarter of the 20th century, the United States transformed from a rural agrarian nation into a largely urban one. Cities experienced marked changes, such as the widespread electrification of businesses, homes, and parks, the introduction of automobiles, the expansion of corporate entities, and waves of immigrants from across Europe. Reacting to these, quote, new possibilities and dislocations of modern life, artists paradoxically depicted sights and scenes outside of urban spaces, favoring pastoral landscape, as Armbruster did, and quaint genre scenes that nostalgically envision life before the Second Industrial Age. It's quite ironic then that the artists that espouse these ideas the most, quote, often found their best expression in the most technologically advanced art of the period, photography. As a resident of Jersey City, one of New Jersey's most densely populated and industrialized cities, Armbruster witnessed the dramatic technological and cultural changes of his home environment with detachment. Instead of focusing on the city and its constantly changing skyline, he turned his camera towards picturesque parcels of land that were gradually vanishing, as well as the activities, social life, and labor associated with the pre-industrialized past. Greatly influenced by the emerging amateur photography movement in the United States, Armbruster's photographic project nostalgically envisions a city where craftsmanship and beauty triumphed over mass-produced industrial objects and nature remained untrammeled by human predation. These ideas are best expressed in this image here, the title image for Armbruster's photo era essay, titled Break, Break, Break on the Cold Gray Stones, OC, from about 1915. In this carbon print photograph, Armbruster brings the viewer outside the urban sprawl to contend that nature rivals the energy found within the city limit. Taken on Newark Bay's shore, Break depicts a seascape from a slight raking angle, sharply focusing on the drama of waves and folding vegetation in the foreground. Utilizing a shallow focus, one might miss the almost imperceptible skyline of Newark sitting on the horizon to the left. Newark's skyline looks like another rounded mass, blending into the rocks that dot the seascape. Armbruster's treatment of Newark's skyline showcases his attempt to harmonize nature with industry, but on the terms in which the dynamic seascape overpowers the disruptive presence of urban development. Significantly, the vantage point captured in Break was a location that Armbruster frequented and thought to be ideal to contemplate nature's beauty and emotional power. Writing in the photo era essay, Armbruster recalls his time spent at this exact site, stating, "Some days I would watch the waves gently splash against the rocks, one following the other, each seeming to tell some tale of sadness which would fill me with an agreeable melancholy. At other times, I would find the water wild and turbulent, a veritable ocean, with wave after wave dashing against the rocks. At such times, I would be impressed with the power of nature and feel how weak we mortals really are." Armbruster reinforces these romantic recollections by titling this seascape with the first two lines of Alfred Lord Tennyson's 1835 poem, Break, Break, Break. In Tennyson's elegy, the speaker stands on a rocky seashore, grappling with the death of a close friend and overcome with feelings of melancholy, loss, and nostalgia. In the last stanza of the poem, the speaker comes to terms with nature's cycles and continuity despite humanity's demise. Similarly, Armbruster's use of long exposure renders the sea as a smooth mass blanketing the rocks, frozen in time and suggesting the eternal and enduring beauty of nature. Armbruster thus asserts that such a sublime and transcendent experience only happens while confronting nature. In many landscapes in this exhibition, Armbruster does not offer a precise and literal description of his subject, but instead uses the subject as a vehicle to reflect what Paul Spencer Sternberger calls a landscape of one's own inner consciousness. Like picturesque landscapes and genre paintings of the 19th century, photographs like The Sentinels on your right and Waning Day on your left, as well as Break, evoke an emotional and intellectual response in the viewer by replacing the camera's capacity for technical perfection with soft and shallow focus, pigmented prints, and long exposures to express an attitude, idea, or emotion. In Armbruster's photographs, views within the city limit are scarce, but Jersey City's development undeniably shaped and informed the subject he focused his camera on. Armbruster arrived in Jersey City from Brooklyn in 1881 at the age of 16 and lived in the southernmost neighborhood of the city, Greenville. His father, Charles Armbruster Sr., purchased an already successful shooting range and expanded its recreational purposes. Covering one square block, Armbruster's Greenville Schutzen Park had a capacity of 5,000 visitors, boasted a carousel, swings, a large pavilion for dancing, and utilized naphtha illumination, also known as gaslighting, encouraging guests to stay after sunset. The park became a popular space for company outings, important civic and social engagements, sporting events, and basket lunches in the picnic groves. After his father's death in 1895, William assumed ownership of Greenville-Schützen Park. His role as proprietor of one of the city's most active parks informed his deeply held conviction that green space was a necessary part of community life in an industrialized city. It was around the time Armbruster assumed ownership of the park that he began photographing events held there, the people that enjoyed and used the space, as well as the sites that bordered its grounds. Armbruster was a self-taught photographer, and his introduction to the medium came after a series of advancements changed the economic and social structure of the photographic industry. Prior to the 1880s, photography flourished as a professional and commercial pursuit, earning the respect as a trade that masterfully blended science and art. Like other tradesmen, professional photographers exhibited a depth of knowledge with their chosen tools, including an intimate understanding of the chemical combinations used to fix an image to a photosensitized plate and then develop it. However, by the late 1880s, new advances such as the creation of the gelatin dry plate process, the introduction of the portable handheld camera, and the advent of the photo finishing industry reduced the specialized skills, economic barriers, and time commitments needed to operate a camera and develop photographs. Consequently, a growing number of amateur users approached the medium as a vocational pursuit and social activity. Eager to share their techniques and photographs with other amateurs, local photography clubs were formed and amateur photography periodicals facilitated artistic and technical discussions around the medium. In the matter of a decade, the entire supply chain of chemicals, materials, and photographic equipment shifted to serve this animated group of amateur users. In 1899, Armbruster and several other residents formed their own photography club, the Greenville Camera Club, and met at Armbruster's Greenville-Schützen Park. For an invitation fee of $10 and a monthly payment of 50 cents, club members traveled on photographic excursions to picturesque locations and attended and participated in lantern slide and print exhibitions with other local photography clubs. As treasurer of the club and an active member, Armbruster created a permanent studio and darkroom on the grounds of Greenville-Schützen Park, where members could meet, photograph indoor scenes and portraits, and develop their own images. As was the case for many photography clubs across the nation, the Greenville Camera Club was composed of educated white men who belonged to a professional class that viewed taking pictures as a, quote, diversion from the pressures of business. More generally, the prominent rise of social clubs and societies at this time reflected a feeling of estrangement brought on by the rapid changes at the turn of the 20th century urban life, as well as the bureaucracy of their own work and the industrialization of modern labor. Amateur photography clubs and periodicals provided a structure and community for anxious urbanites seeking cultural and social regeneration through nostalgic and sentimental subjects viewed through a veil of art. Armbruster visualized these subjects by applying the stylistic and aesthetic ideas found in pictorialism. The popular photographic style looked towards painting's visual vocabulary to elevate photography from a scientific tool to an artistic medium. By using soft focus, dramatic lighting, pigmented and platinum prints, and making visible the texture of the photographic surface, pictorial photographers viewed photography as a craft and allied themselves with artisans working with metal, ceramics, or wood. Many amateurs, including Armbruster, literalized these ideas in his images. Seen in this work here, The Artisan Metalsmith. This photograph captures a 3/4 length portrait of the local coppersmith, Mr. Kunz. Leaning over his workbench, wearing a well-worn apron and surrounded by the tools and objects of his trade, copper lids, a pair of calipers, and a rawhide mallet. Despite mechanized labor eclipsing craftsmanship in the first quarter of the 20th century, Armbruster captures the feeling of his subjects' attentive and measured strikes on a decorative vessel. As other pictorialists, he approached photography as a craftsman and made artistic decisions that are visible in the photograph to enhance the handmade quality of this image. He tinted the photograph a warm copper tone, lightened the area around the subject's head, and focused his lens on the object being made rather than the studio. In addition, Armbruster's use of the platinum printing process, the most durable metal-based method of printing, gives a nod to Kunz's craft and the medium he uses. All of these choices reflect the photographer's heartfelt and personal connections between his craft and that of Kunz, romanticizing the craftsman's individuality, agency, and pride. As a photographer, Armbruster's highest priority was stressing the handmade quality of his work. This was carried out through his preferred printing method, the carbon printing process. With this process, Armbruster made, quote, pictures in pigment, almost the same as if made with paint and brush, absolutely permanent with no limit of choice of color. Armbruster's variation on this typical process was to place 3 pieces of celluloid between the carbon tissue and negative to create an atmospheric quality that he preferred in his final print. Armbruster used the carbon printing process in this photograph here, titled The Smithy, which depicts an ironworker constructing a wagon wheel. The soft and subtle gradations from dark brown to a pale orange resemble the hues and tonal depth found in painting, rather than the stark clarity of tone typically attributed to photographs. Although Armbruster approached photography as a tool for personal expression, his works are representative of the larger amateur photography movement. In the wake of rapid industrial and technological developments, amateur photographers used this modern invention to distance themselves from an urban environment that increasingly put machine before craft, profits before community, and urban development before nature. Whether it be Armbruster's melancholic rendering of the North Bay shore, his intimate portrait of a local artisan, or photographs of beloved local sites, his photographic project highlights the camera's capacity to make intellectually stimulating and emotionally enriching images. Armbruster, like many photographers of his time, resisted the technical perfection offered by the camera in favor of a poetry that foregrounded his desire to look back onto a way of life where craft, individualism, and personal expression were valued over the pursuit of capital and the estrangement of urban life. So thanks for bearing with me there. I wanted to say that please hold your questions till the end, and I will stop sharing now and have Hannah take it over for her little virtual tour. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Austin, for that incredible tour. I feel like I learned so much. It was so wonderful to see those photographs again. And thank you to Donna for the lovely introduction and to Janine for organizing this. I feel like Austin does too. It's so nice to be back at the Zimmerli doing this event tonight. One last thank you that I wanted to add is to Hallie McNabb, who was an intern last year at the Zimmerli, and she helped create, or really created, the illustrated checklist that we have in the exhibition, and we'll be looking at that together. So that was a really important part of the show. So I want to thank her for that. All right, like Austin's exhibition, Snapshots, selections from the Peter J. Cohen Gift, focuses on amateur photography. It highlights how people have integrated photography into their lives, using it to capture and create intimate moments of joy, play, celebration, work, and much more. And like Donna mentioned, it's also really an example of the expanding ideas of what types of photography should be included in a museum exhibition. So in a certain way, right, this is kind of Austin's project is very historical, as you see, and right, there's lots of layers of history to dig into. In this exhibition, right, we're working with a different set of material that really comes, for the most part, without any historical context. And so that's one of the challenges of working with this, these snapshots, which we'll be talking about, is right, how do you present photographs or really objects in general that are very engaging and wonderful to look at, but they also don't have the kind of historical information that we're used to having, especially with photographs. So it's interesting, I think the exhibitions work really nicely for that reason together, right? Both photographs, amateur photographs, but kind of the two ends of the spectrum in terms of historical material you have to work with. The story of this exhibition begins in 2019, and that year, the pioneering collector of snapshot photography, Peter J. Cohen, pictured here, invited Donna to make a selection from his massive archive of snapshots. And she was very kind to invite Austin and I to come along to help make the very difficult decisions that happened on those meetings. So we went there to his studio for maybe 3 or 4 visits, and we sifted through his material and decided what we wanted to add to the collection. So in the end, I think we selected around 150 photographs, and this exhibition includes roughly half of those that we selected. Okay, so the exhibition begins in one way in 2019, but in another way, it begins in 1888 when George Eastman first released the Kodak camera. And this camera had the famous slogan, as you see here on one of the advertisements, of "You press the button and we do the rest." And that was both catchy and very accurate, because this camera came, as you see here, as a box, and it was loaded with film, and all you had to do was point and click, and then you could send the box back to Kodak, and they would develop the photographs for you, make negatives and prints. So really, this was a revolutionary moment in photography, because it really democratized it, or just made it so that you didn't have to have any expertise, any skills of any kind, or special chemicals or materials. Really, anyone could take a photograph who wanted to, or who had the means to do so. So that kind of begins the story of snapshots. And really, what's fascinating to me is when you look back at these first, this is on the left here, this is an example of one of the first Kodak snapshots that was produced, or from the first generation of snapshots. This isn't in the exhibition, but it was part of Peter J. Cohen's collection at one time. And so you see this little snapshot from the first camera had this circular format, and you see this little, this desire to have this portrait of one's little dog. And then this is a photo in our exhibition, probably taken, it's hard to say, but maybe in the 40s or 50s, a hand-colored photograph, right? So you have a similar impulse, similar desires from the very beginning of snapshots at the end of the 19th century, moving forward. Let's have one more example of that, right? We'll be looking in a moment, but one of our categories is work that we used in the show. And here we have, again, another early photograph of a man at work, right? You kind of see his messy desk right there. He is kind of taken by surprise. And it's so similar to this photograph that we have. Again, right, we don't have a date, but right, maybe in the 50s or 60s, right? So a similar impulse, there's really a similar impulse and a set of kind of things that people wanted to do with their camera that begins from the very start of amateur photography of this variety, of kind of the snapshot variety. Okay, so as I mentioned before, one of the challenges in working with basically sort of orphaned family photos, or photos that people took of their friends, is that you don't have often you don't have a date or any kind of material associated with it. So the question becomes, how do you organize it in a meaningful way, in a way that has coherence and kind of generates some understanding of either the history of photography or how people lived or what they did with photography. So Mr. Cohen had a very interesting method, and I'm including, this is a photograph of his his method, essentially, these boxes that he had, these archival boxes in his studio with these different categories that he identified. So some of them are, activities like, I don't know if you can really see on this, but it says sports. But some are more based on motifs that he noticed, and we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at those kind of categories too. So women with cars, or birthday cakes, or kind of these similar ways people posed, or things like that. So we kind of in organizing this exhibition thought about, we didn't use the exact categories. We thought of our own categories. We didn't use Mr. Cohen's categories per se, but it was a helpful way to think about how to present the material in an interesting and kind of coherent way, right? To think about themes and motifs and categories of use. So that was something that we used to organize the show. And ultimately, the exhibition is organized into 10 of these thematic groups. And then with one case in the center that's devoted to studio portrait photography, which is another genre that was mixed in among the snapshots within Mr. Cohen's collection. So we decided that it made sense to think about that as a separate category because studio portraiture it's done by professionals and had a different set of kind of concerns associated with it. So we really wanted to include it in the show, and they're great photographs, but we wanted to think about a way to visually separate them from the rest of the material. So that's why we decided to put it in this case. And also, as you'll see in a moment, they have a different kind of materiality. Some of them have this kind of cardboard that they're on. So we have these 10 categories. And organized, all of the categories are put into one frame, so you can really think about them together. So now I'm just going to kind of go through the categories and we can look a little bit at the some of the specific photographs. And I was thinking that it might be fun if you took note of what category you liked the best as we were doing this, and maybe at the end you could type in, we could do like kind of a vote. Just what photographs did you like the most, or maybe that you related to the most? Because these are, as I should have said before, this is a very familiar form of photography. This is a form of photography that we use now, that we grew up with. So I think that as we go through this, you'll feel an emotional connection or some kind of resonance to a lot of what we see. So maybe take note of what category you like the best, and maybe you could type it in at the end, and we can kind of see which ones people like the most. So this first category is family, which seemed like a good way to start since family photos are so important. And just so many charming photographs, and ones that, like all of the photographs, really make you ask a lot of questions. You want to know the stories of these people. You want to know where they were going or what they were doing. Right? This is a photograph that we used as one of the main photographs in sort of marketing the show, because I love it in particular because we have this little boy who has a camera here, right, ready to take his own snapshot. So that really kind of captured the spirit of the show for us. And also, right, this very stylish maybe father, right, with his suit. So kind of capturing the modernity and the excitement of this moment. Right, another of these figures here, and another kind of intimate moment of play between maybe family members or maybe friends, but kind of thinking about the spirit of family. And then, of course, very important part of photography or role photography played, which is that of traveling, traveling with family, taking photographs, bringing them back to share with other people. Right? So we have this photo of Mount Rushmore in this little group right here. This is an example of kind of motifs that you would never necessarily know that many people were doing, but one motif that we found in the course of looking at Mr. Cohen's photographs was this interest in taking group portraits on ladders. So there were many of them, and these were just a few that we chose. So just love the kind of composition that this kind of choice made. And you can see many different groups of people choosing the same method of portraiture. And then then there were many portraits in which people used aspects of the environment to kind of frame them or add a humorous dimension to their portraits. So you see here and we called this category chutes and ladders to think about those two kind of trends. And this one is really fun too, right? A sense sort of a turn of the century portrait where they're all climbed up the, I guess, grain silo. The next category is special occasions. And right, we have important special occasions. We have a wedding, a graduation, of course, the birthday photograph, which is very important. I love this one in particular, and kind of capturing that intensity of the birthday moment, where really it shows the beauty of this kind of photography in that it's able to show you these inside moments, right? We don't know these people, but we really get a sense that we're there at this moment, maybe in a way that a professional photographer can't quite capture. And this is just an example of how it looks in the gallery, how they are grouped together within the frame. So you see another challenge is that they are, because they're snapshots, they are quite small too. So that's another consideration in putting them together. Our next category is people and plants. Lots of photographs where people are using their environment to embellish the photographs, often harmonizing with the natural environment. So you have this woman here popping her head out of this bush. This woman's hairstyle, right, looking very similar to this sculpted bush next to her. And this little boy framed by this house plant, all very charming and interesting. And here it is in its frame. The next category is friends. So there were many photographs of friends to choose from. And again, they really seem to capture these moments of intimacy with these groups, especially these young boys at the end of the night, this group of these little children playing together. I like the dog with the hat. There are a number of charismatic dogs in this show, as you've already noticed. And this was a bigger group, so it was it extended beyond one page. And there's so many really details. If we had more time, we could really look at. I love this one with the little girls and this kind of game that they're playing on this ship. And here they are together. This is the next series in the gallery, so you can see how it goes together. Right? This is cars, working life, and take a seat, and the arts. So we can just look at those quickly. Cars were a very big theme and in these photographs, and often, just like the ladders, that people, groups would be gathered around a car, or a car would frame them, as is the case with this great photograph. And right here, we had a number of sort of celebrities pop in and out of our amateur photographs, including here, we have President Kennedy in, and this was taken, I believe we figured it out from the back of the photograph, but it was taken in Germany in 1963 on his famous trip to Germany. So we have this view of a person in Germany seeing him during this parade. Next category is working life. So there are many photographs of people taken in the workplace, doing their job, or performing their profession. Hey, we have a boxer, another Kennedy, again, here shown. We included this in working life because he seems to really be on the campaign trail, Robert F. Kennedy. We have a group of workers taking a break here. And then another woman who seems to be diligently transcribing something. A milkman and a soldier and a woman dressed up as a cowboy or working as a cowboy. And we also have another woman in a soldier's uniform. It's an interesting range of soldiers in this show. And a nurse here, right? So lots of interesting professions. We enjoyed this motif too, take a seat, we decided to call it. Of course, the seated portrait is very common, and especially for babies, kind of propping up a baby and taking a photograph. So here we have a wonderful one, right, from, maybe the turn of the century, an early photograph. And here another baby photograph where this baby has been kind of propped up with various toys. It was almost indistinguishable from her dolls around her. And then another photograph of this woman here. And our little dog from the beginning of the slideshow is in this category of take a seat. The next category is the arts. We had many photographs of photographers taking their own photograph, taking their own portrait in mirrors to choose from. And we chose this one because in part because the photographer had included a title called Time for Reflection, which is very appropriate, of course. And just other interesting photographs of, here we have a painter, a ballerina. This photograph was also fascinating to me because it was clearly taken by a spectator at the World's Fair in 1939, and captured this famous sculpture by Augusta Savage that was on display there. The next category is the circus, and one of the reasons we chose to include many circus photographs in our selection is because the Zimmerli has a large collection of material related to the circus in the French section of the Zimmerli's collection. So we were thinking about what are ways that we can enrich the existing collection with these photographs that we're accepting. So we took these photographs thinking that maybe they could be used as in juxtaposition with those existing materials. But of course, they're also fun to look at themselves. As I mentioned, the final section is studio portraiture. And so studio portraiture, which has never really completely gone out of fashion. We still engage in studio. We still go to studio, have our photographs taken in studios today, right? But it's had many different lives since photography was invented in 1839. And in this case, we have an example of cabinet cards, which were popular in the end of the 19th century, and that they offered a durable object for people to share with friends, but they also had an advertising component for the photographer. So you see a good example here of a photographer working in Sweden, and this cabinet card actually was taken at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893 by one of the official photographers. So you can see Jackson Park, Chicago. So we have that's taken, we know specifically where that's taken. So that's exciting. And it's interesting to see that. It was sort of a souvenir photograph taken at that time. And other photographs in this case show the changing fashions of studio portraiture. Especially, right, we have here the kind of the turn of the century or early 20th century interest in using props and painted backdrops, very kind of constructed atmospheres or environments for their portraits. So we have this woman in this series of 4, right, with the American flag and in this kind of interesting environment. This photograph of a geisha here is an example of celebrity photography and a celebrity photograph that was sent to a Japanese soldier stationed abroad, which we know from the inscription written on the surface of the photograph, which refers to, the inscription refers to Manchuria, which is located in contemporary China, but which Japan was occupying between 1931 and 1945. And the inscription begins praying for the safe return of good soldiers who are committed to the war, right? So we kind of get, in the studio portrait section, we get a little bit more context than we got in many of the other photographs. So this is where the exhibition ends, but I really hope that you have a chance to come and see it in person and enjoy these photographs and study them in more detail. And of course, visit Austin's exhibition too. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Once again, I'd like to thank Hannah and Austin for this wonderful tour, and also Donna as well for that great introduction and for mentoring such wonderful, talented individuals, which I'm so excited to get to see and who I miss very much seeing at the museum. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and everything that you all do as members to support us as a museum and to keep the museum open and accessible for everyone. So that being said, feel free to use that Q&A section right at the bottom of your screen to type in, and I will field questions to either Austin or Hannah. While we are waiting for some questions to come in, I'll be selfish and ask my own question, if that's okay. Let's start with Hannah. How did Peter Cohen amass this collection of snapshots? I'm assuming it was something like garage sales or things like that, and also how long did it take him to grow such what seemed like those archive boxes? You guys weren't kidding. That's a lot. So I'm curious how long something like that took.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my understanding is he started out as a collector of fine art photography and then became really fascinated by these snapshots in maybe the 90s and really started at flea markets and on eBay and all of these secondary marketplaces where photographs would end up that no one wanted. And when he started, they weren't in demand, and he just really, I think, purchased them by like the truckloads if he could.
Wow.
And, it's according to him, he has, or at least had at the height, 60,000 of these photographs. So he really, really had a lot of them. And there were a lot of them. Now, I think he was saying that now he has to go through dealers if he wants. Is that Austin? Is this sounding right? Like he has to go through dealers now, but because it has become more of a collecting area. But yeah, he really started in those flea markets and garage sales and all those things, as you mentioned.
That's excellent. And Whitney has a question. Were the colors of the boxes for the photo storage based on related themes? Did he color code, I think, which is one of my favorite things to do when I'm feeling organized? Were things color coded? I know we talked about the color orange a little bit before we started. So
I mean, Austin, maybe you remember. I think it was not color coded. It was mostly orange boxes. And you had the feeling that maybe some of the boxes ran out and then he had to get some other colors. But no, he had little labels on each of them. But that's a good question. Yeah, no color coding. As far as I remember. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, I don't think they were color coded. I just think he had preferences for those two colors, and it definitely extended to his apartment furnishings as well, the orange and black. So
that's awesome. And Sonia asked, how did he keep them in such good condition? I'm assuming that those boxes were low acid or something like that. Is that correct in assuming?
Yeah, he also put them all into little plastic sleeves.
Oh,
so
wow.
They were very protected, which, yeah, because many people went through them all the time. So yeah, but it is really amazing that they stayed in such good shape before they got to him even, because they were around for 50 years floating around. But yeah, he's taking care of them very carefully.
So did he open up this archive or this studio to many people then, if people were constantly kind of looking? Was that the case?
Yeah, I think at a certain point he really decided he wanted to give them to as many museums as he could and really wanted to share the collection. And as far as I understand too, he's been a pretty big force in helping bring snapshots into museums, just because his collection is so good. Just the sheer scale of it really makes you realize how much you can do with it. So I wonder if we would see snapshots in museums so much if he hadn't taken this interest. Austin, what do you think about that? Austin was equally involved in this, so I want to defer to him sometimes.
Yeah, I think he was definitely the forerunner in sort of making these systematic donations to major cultural institutions. I just wanted to backtrack to Sonia's question, because I think it also taps into a part of the show that, when you go see them and think about your own photographs and how you engage and preserve and save and display your photographs. These once belonged to people. They once were cherished moments. And so the fact that they're in such good condition says a lot about how we value these moments that we take photos of and what they sort of might represent for future generations and why we preserve them.
Awesome. Let's see. Oh, Claire totally stole my question that I was going to ask too. Were there amateur photo clubs for women? I know we noticed that we both must have noticed that photograph of the men seemed to just be men for the amateur photo club. Can you speak to if women were allowed?
Yeah, so predominantly they were males clubs, and a lot of social clubs at the time were male dominated. That does not mean that women did not have social clubs or have photography clubs. I know there was one in particular, and I'm sorry, Claire, I can get back to you on this. I have your email, obviously. There was a very popular group whose archives are in one of the major manuscript collections in Philadelphia. It was a Philadelphia-based women photography club, and it's held at one of the universities in Philly. But yes, a majority of the social clubs around this time were male-dominated and got the most press in local newspapers and stuff. So they exist, women's clubs for sure. You just have to do a little bit more digging.
I figured as much. Thanks, Austin. Oh, and let's see. Mark Roderick said how wonderful the Armbruster photos were, especially as a Jersey City native. And he was wondering, oh, he loves the break, break, break photograph, which is beautiful. I agree. And was wondering what your personal favorite work was in the show, in the Armbruster show, Austin.
Yeah, so I personally really like Break, Break, Break. It did a lot of work for me thinking about the show, just because the way he treats the urban skyline and how he sort of is blending it in with the rest of nature. It got me really thinking about what Armbruster is doing, and maybe, he didn't really leave a lot of writing behind, but it sort of hinted at sort of his ideology and sort of his belief about green space in the urban space. And I think more generally, what I really love about the show, and Mark, I know we'll have an ongoing discussion about this, but during research, I found a lot of wonderful micro histories, and as a Jersey City native, you'll love to hear them about certain parks that the Greenville Photography Club were trying to preserve, and in the newspapers used photographs to try to preserve those green spaces that actually didn't come to fruition. It didn't work, and those became sort of railways and highways as time went on. But there are all these really beautiful microhistories about they're taking photographs to sort of preserve the space that's gradually vanishing around them. And I'll share that with you.
Awesome, thank you. Oh, and then for both of you, why have museums become interested in amateur photography?
This is a hard question. It's one I think about a lot because I really quite enjoy it, and I think Hannah hinted at it as well, in the sense that when I think about photography, I think about, ever since its invention, the amount of photographs taken and the possibility for everyday people like you and me to take photographs have become so effortless and seamless into our daily lives. I mean, I think half the photographs, maybe even 90% of the photographs we take with our phone, we never look at again. But to sort of think about how everyday people are using a medium to preserve family histories for posterity's sake is really an interesting facet that I think art photography and commercial photography can't really get at. What do you think, Hannah?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's just the story of the history of photography is so tiny if you don't consider these types of photographs that, make up 99% of the photographs that are taken. And so I think that is a big part of it too. It's like, what kind of history are we telling of photography? And yeah, so I think and it just, we get so many, the different voices we get to hear and photographs we get to see. There's just so much it's just so much broader when we open it up. So I think it's all those things. And they're just great to look at too. So in addition to that, I think it's just the magnetism of these little photographs are pretty strong.
Excellent. Well, both of your shows are wonderful, and I encourage everybody to come and view things in person. We have time for a few more. So let's see. Oh, Austin, can you talk about what a carbon print is exactly?
Yeah, so as you could tell, I'm a very scripted person, so my talk was very scripted, and I had a whole instruction on how to do it, and it kind of got, it's like no one's going to understand this really, but basically it's a printing process that started occurring in the late 19th century that amateur photographers really took to, because it was a way to manipulate the photograph in a way that resembled painting. So you could really capture tonal shifts differently and capture colors differently without sort of getting in the technicals, because it might get lost on everyone. But just think about if Kodak is pressing the button and letting them do the rest, carbon printing is really about you being in control about how the final print looks. And in particular for carbon printing, it was done through color.
Excellent. Let's see, was there any pushback on early amateur photography by professional photographers? It's a great question.
Yeah, there was a lot, just because you had the snapshotters as Hannah dealt with, when Kodak came out. And then you had these amateur photographers like Armbruster, who are really, weren't economically constrained. This wasn't their professional pursuit. So they could really take risks and experiment with the medium. But then, in the last section of Hannah's show, these portrait photographers, they're making a livelihood off this medium. And so there was absolutely a pushback initially about sort of catering to amateurs, and also about how they were degrading the medium. But really it was because they were sort of anxious about their livelihood being kind of infiltrated by a bunch of users who might now take portraits of friends and families, and they won't come to the studio to do so. Yeah.
If they could see Instagram right now, I think they'd pass out.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But the funny thing is then, like, if you flash forward to like the 60s, there's like the new documents movement, or photographers who are on like the cutting edge of photography are adopting that snapshot aesthetic for themselves and like absorbing that into high photography, quote unquote. So it's an interesting exchange that happens of resisting and then adopting. And yeah.
It's interesting how things change, but then still stay the same, right? Excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to thank you both so much. What a wonderful tour. Again, I'd like to encourage everybody to come and see these two wonderful exhibitions in person. I'd like to thank Donna as well for her help and for introducing the both of you and being here with us tonight. I'd also like to take this opportunity to make sure all of our members save the date out here for October 29th. We're having our first in-person member event of the academic year, and it will be a talk featuring Robin Schwartz, who is a photographer from the Jersey City Museum collection. So she'll be talking about her photograph series of animals and people and photographing them together. So it's very exciting to have so much photography at the museum, and to kind of continue that and looking at photography in a different way. So I hope everybody saves the date for October 29th from 5 to 7. But of course, you'll be receiving many correspondence about that and about some future upcoming member events that we have at the museum. So once again, I'd like to thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Austin. It was so great to see you and spend the evening together. Thank you for all your insights, and congrats to you both on two beautiful and fascinating exhibitions. So congrats to you all, and thank you all again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.